Hello and welcome back to the Beyond the Ice Walls Second Ring series. This is the 10th episode of the series that started over 2 years ago, and today we'll continue our journey into this map. So, for those that have not been here the last times, this is a map with a projection that makes it so that not only the entire Earth can be seen from one side, above, but also there's more rings to the Earth that divide it between the Earth we all know and the Earth that has been hidden, lost, away. We have made a first series when we talked about the entire first ring that is divided from our world through Antarctica, so the ice wall, and then we made and started making a second series over what is over the mountain ring, which divides this first area from what is called the second ring. We went from here in Weldrum all the way in this direction to the places that we looked at last week, or rather 2 months ago. Actually, I don't remember, but it's been a while. And last time we did Terra Nova, the Legacy of Sumenia, and Amun-Ra, the stronghold of the Nephilim. If you're interested in this concept, go check out that video, by the way. Today we'll move south once more, and we'll do this part here of the map. Let us start with the Garden Isles. So, first of all, a bit of context. We are in the Enlightened Ocean right here, and afterwards there's the Sea of Shadows. We went south from Amun-Ra. Remember also that this red line that goes through these places is supposed to be the equator of this ring. So we've seen what other territories are traversed by this equator, and so are the Garden Isles. So first of all, this is an archipelago. We can see it diversed in many different islands. And there's also a HD map that I'll put right here that shows you what the geography and terrain of these specific islands looks like, especially in a more, I would say, probably detailed fashion. So the Garden Isles, like most of these places in the second ring, has a little subtitle to it, and that is the Holy Hunting Ground. Well, why is that? Geography-wise, they are in the east part, probably more desertic. Then we go to a savanna-like climate, and then finally we go to prairies / fertile terrain right here in the middle, and then it becomes some sort of rainforest, right up the point where it unites with Horus, the Great Pillars. So, the Garden Isles and its little subtitles, the Holy Hunting Grounds, actually has a pretty well-reasoned explanation. The original inhabitants of this archipelago practiced a cruel sport, which was called anthro-hunting, in which humans that lived nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyles were hunted like animals and then either taken as slaves or consumed as food. So we can see there is a cannibalism theme here. This practice, although not, far spread across the world, has been noticed in civilizations of old, and even some contemporary cultures, like the ones in Papua New Guinea, do still practice some sort of tribalism, although the hunting part is probably not the case. In this place, the Garden Isles, this practice is done by the other inhabitants of the isles, which are not what we recognize immediately as Homo sapiens. Instead, although related to them, they are the Mu, or the Muans, which live in the continent next to it, Mu. Although many of you already know the story of Mu, I will not cover it in this video, so if you're interested in it, I will cover it in the next video. But the gist of it, actually, you know what? I will leave the gist of it for the next video. I'm not gonna go into Mu, but just know that the people that rule the Garden Isles at the beginning of our story are the same people that rule Mu, the Empire of Stonemen. So, once again, these Muans rule the Garden Isles, which are this diverse and vast archipelago, and rule over these humans, these hominids, which would probably be Eurasian hunter-gatherers, which live some semi-nomadic or nomadic lifestyles. They hunt them as a sport, which is anthro-hunting, and when they catch them, they even use it as slave labor, or most often actually, they use it as food, as fuel for themselves. This all changed in 1522, when a band of sailors from the Caribbean of native Taino origins arrived on the Garden Isles after a voyage of Odyssean proportions. So just so you realize how far they made the journey, let's travel back to the Caribbean. Caribbean of course starts right about here. Let's make our cursor a bit smaller, maybe a bit smaller again. And from what I've heard, they start from Cuba. Now 1522 is a very specific date to make this journey start, because 1522 is not much long after when Columbus arrived in the New World and started colonizing the Caribbean. 1522 means that there's still areas of the Caribbean which are not ruled by the Spanish and where the native Taino people still live. So let's say that from this part of Cuba, the Taino managed to flee from their Spanish overlords. Or maybe their area was not controlled by the Spanish yet. They traversed the Sentinel's Gate, this area right here, on the southern part of Antarctica, and continued the journey. They probably moved, so the thing you might not remember from the first series is that Thoth is a nomadic continent, which means that it moves instead of remaining in the same place for all time, which probably means that they couldn't take a pit stop at Thoth, which means that their travel was even more difficult. So let's say they stopped at Mincin Nevis and then continued right here. They circumnavigated this area, and now let's see where they could have escaped. So this area might seem like a place you can go through, but actually no, you can zoom in and you can actually see that there's, you know, not a passage there. But if I remember correctly, where was the passage? Man, I forgot. Oh, it was right here. Ah, man. So they might have taken a completely different route. I have to retrace this. My bad, my bad. So at this point, I am going to assume that the only way they could have made it is that Thoth was indeed here, so they could have done some sort of pit stop here, and then continued right here into Cocaine, and maybe traversed this right here, this strait, went through all this perilous land, and finally got out of the mountain ring to places like Weldrum. I guess, oh man, there's another connection here. So they couldn't even, man. Odyssean proportions related to the span of the epic voyage of Odysseus in the old Homerian poem and myth really makes you wonder how far they went. Okay, there are a bunch of islands here which I've not covered yet, so I guess they could have stopped there. Maybe here? Oh man, there's just... oh man. How did they get there? How did they... the Scylla Charybdis is not... I'm not even gonna mention anything, but Scylla Charybdis is not an easy place to travel to. Okay, just for sake of purpose, let's just say they went all like this, okay? Fine. This feels a bit impossible, frankly. So my other explanation could be that they probably went this way instead and might have found some way to traverse this place right here. Or, as we've seen sometimes happen in this map, some sort of spatial distortion happened which caused a portal of sorts to appear right around the Caribbean and immediately transfer them to the Garden Isles. But if that's not the case, then they actually arrived there through boats, which is just frankly insane to even believe. But anyways, these native inhabitants met with these first sailors. So when these first sailors arrived, they quickly made first contact with the humans that were living there in these islands, and taught them how to sail and lay traps. So remember, these humans that are living here, and that are basically under the domain and under these cruel sportsmanships of the Muans, have basically not really evolved as a society, you know? They just remained nomadic hunter-gatherers. But then the Taino come and they teach them how to sail a boat, how to escape from these Muans, and also how to lay traps. Why is this important? Well, once the new anthro hunting season started, these hunters fell in the traps of their prey, so the Muans got caught in the traps of the humans, and then were eaten by them in a tribal reversal of roles. Since then, the native and the Taino mixed in an oceanic sailor culture that expanded across the entire archipelago and nearby lands. They participate in mass raids and primitive forms of piracy in honor of the tradition of their ancestors. And this is why it's called the Holy Hunting Grounds. not only because of the historic origins of this tradition, but also because this whole pirate, kind of raider tradition, which revolves around hunting humans, has become some sort of ingrained part of the religion that is now being mixed between the beliefs of the Taino and the beliefs of the original inhabitants, fusing into a single people. And that's about it when it comes to the Garden Isles. If I had to guess, I would say that these guys kind of control the seas around them, so both the enlightened oceans and probably parts of the Sea of Shadows, although I don't know much about it yet, so it might be harder to traverse, who knows. They probably colonize places like the Inunnaki Islands, or these places right here, at least the coastal places, like in Horus. Especially because, as far as I've seen, Horus is kind of impossible to get to, and we'll talk about it later. Later we'll see Horus. But short quip about the Inunnaki Islands, there's really not much about it, and they're really small on the map, but some little fun information is that apparently the people that live here are related to the Japanese people, hence the name which is in the Japanese language. I don't know much more about it, but that's kind of like the only connection. The only place I could really understand this coming from is, I guess, if they traverse right at the same point of the people of the Garden Isles, but apparently it's in a different period. So who knows? Maybe not. The Yamato people got there? Who knows? Anyways, now that we've done the Garden Isles, let's actually get to the main content of this episode, which is Horus, the Great Pillar of Akupara. So this pillar part should remind you that we already did a content regarding to pillars, and now I will find it because it's been a while and I will take me some time to actually find it back. It might not even have been a pillar, but I remember the part about pillars. I just remember the part about pillars. Where was it? Where was it? There we go. I found it. My bad. Iram, the city of 1,000 pillars. This was the other place that had to do with pillars. But this place actually has to do with, built pillars. Not the way that Horus has to do with pillars. Because, in case you don't know, the Great Pillar of Akupara, which is, by the way, the name that is used to refer to the entire second ring area, after the mountain ring and before the wastes. So this entire ring is called Akupara, just like the first ring was called Atlas. So the pillar in this case refers to the entire continent. In fact, it's not structures that are made up top of the continent, but the entire thing. Why? Well, because Horus is a continent whose shores have no beaches, and its coastline is made of stiff cliffs hundreds of feet tall, where basically arriving there as a human is almost impossible, because you'd had to climb through thousands of meters of walls. And you can even see this if you zoom into the map. If you go right here, you can actually see what they're talking about by just looking at this red kind of outline that the entire continent has. You can see it very clearly, especially since it's the only continent that has this, where every single place has this red outline, and the other ones have this blue outline, which is supposed to be the reverse of it. So yeah, it's impossible to get to. Basically, the entire continent is at the same height and as tall as the Alps in Europe, which for comparison we're talking kilometers above the sea level. Although I don't think the entirety of Horus is at the same sea level as the Alps. I believe there's also mountains on top of it and places where the entire thing goes a bit more south. Or rather, not south, just, less tall, shorter. So this weird coastline made it almost impossible and completely isolated from the rest of the world. So what is interesting about this continent? Well, really there's not much I could find about it, but the name could explain everything, and I had to do a bit of mythology searching for this. As you all know, on this channel we mainly try to use mythology as a way to describe and explain things that we see on these maps or things that we see on these videos that cannot be explained in any other way, and in this case I think I might have figured out what it is talking about. So Horus, those who know, right? Egyptian mythology. Let's get into it. It is one of the main ancient Egyptian deities. Horus was the god of kings, healing, the sun, and most importantly for this video, the sky. He was worshipped for millennia across much of North Africa and parts of Asia. He was depicted as a falcon or a man with a falcon head. He was the son of Osiris and Isis. I can't say that name unfortunately because people will think it's the other one and YouTube will censor this video. Anyways, it's the other goddess, one of the main goddesses of ancient Egyptian mythology. She was the mother goddess and the goddess of mourning, while Osiris was the god of the dead, the afterlife, and life itself. Horus, their son, was the figure most closely associated with the pharaohs, which were seen through his incarnation as the sons of Ra. What does this have to do with this continent we're looking at? Well, I think it has to do with its position on top of the earth. This is a continent that extrudes into the sky. It clearly is, from wherever else you see it from, some sort of huge mountain. And I would say that in another way you could see it as a pyramid. Although instead of a normal pyramid where the top is right in the middle, in this case, as we can see on this map, I would say the top is around here, as this brown area is usually referred to as mountains in this map, while there's a massive lake inside of it. And I think, and this might be the explanation that is more probable as we've seen with many maps of the kind, that this is supposed to be the seat of the Egyptian gods. Much like we've seen with Valhalla right here and Asgard, or Hyperborea, in this part of the map, on the opposite corner of the map here is Horus. Not only the place that is referred to the pillar, not only the place whose summit is the same thing as touching the sky, just like Horus, but also the place where all of Egyptian mythology had place, or rather where the gods of Egypt have their stay. Basically, this is their home. That's what I'm getting to anyways. So Ra, Osiris, that other goddess that I can say, Sekhmet, Sobek, Horus, they all live here, and all their myths had to do with this. And maybe, just like some people believe that ancient aliens got to Egypt and they were the Egyptian gods, maybe it wasn't aliens, it was just people, or rather what they thought as gods, that existed right into the second ring, in Horus. So in this case you could argue that maybe instead of just having godly powers like the ancient Egyptians described, the society that lived in Horus was really advanced. And the reason why they were this advanced was because they were kind of like isolated in their own universe, where they didn't really know how to access other areas because of the isolation of their continent, since their cliffs were too tall to learn about navigation. Or maybe their navigation was only restricted to their main lake right here. And this made them an airborne society. Some could travel through some sort of primordial air transport. And some of them maybe managed to go over the mountain ring, at least in this part where it's less huge. As you might already know, the mountain ring is basically unsurmountable. By flight it's way too tall. And then they went over Antarctica and maybe they settled right here in this area, which caused the entire mythology of Egypt to start. This is at least the way I'm interpreting this part of the map, because otherwise why would it be called Horus, right? Why would it have this relation to the ancient Egyptian gods? And once again, it makes sense in this context, since we've seen the same kind of thing, or at least a similar one, with this entire part of the map with Asgard, Valhalla, and the First Empire. So now that that is done, let's see another part of this map, right in the north of Horus and to the west of the Garden Isles. This is... Oh, you wanted to talk about Teslanesia? No, I'm talking about Bigle. Bigle, what is this? I have no idea. I found nothing on this, it's just Bigle, the Isles of Inspiration. They're inspiring. This was so funny, I'm sorry, because like, come on, I'm trying to take this seriously, and I'm like looking at all these continents which are extremely interesting, and I have like so much information to research about them, and then you just go south and you just find this random little island, or rather I guess it's a very small archipelago, and it's just the Isles of Inspiration. I guess this is like, they're trying to inspire me to continue the series, which has gone on for 2 years. I guess that's why they exist. I actually, let's just say it, I added them in post. I'm kidding, of course, they were already here, but it is pretty funny. Anyways, right in the Enlightened Ocean, we find the continent of Teslanesia. I mean, once again, this is less like a single continent and more of an archipelago. Teslanesia is called the Electrified Islands. Although the name might make you think about a certain Elon Musk figure that rules a company called Tesla, well, the association is purely about electricity. The name refers simply to one of the most important scientists in history and had to do with electricity. I'm talking, of course, about the famous Nikola Tesla, the Serbian inventor. And I already know there will be Croats in this comment section saying that he was Croatian since he's born in modern Croatia. No, he was Serbian. He was ethnically Serbian. But once again, he was also American since he migrated to America and became naturalized American. So I guess you can also call him American. But I don't know how you call it Croatian. That's kind of weird. Anyways, the first thing you notice about Teslanesia is its geography. And you can clearly see it just by looking at it and in this map that I will show you, which is a bit more HD. But yeah, basically the entire sea of Teslanesia seems to have these weird currents kind of things going on, and also on the surface itself of the continent. There's two main islands. One is this right here that kind of looks like Panama, and then there's like this one right here with a river in it. And what is with this green, yellowish kind of liquid going on? Well, that's not a liquid and it's not green. It's actually yellow and it's supposed to represent the electricity that is going on in the entirety of these islands. So you might think, because of it, that there's no life. This is completely uninhabitable continent. There's no way anything could develop in land so harsh. Well, despite all the problems, you can kind of see examples of life that has evolved the ability to resist electricity, or at least produce it themselves, in the world we already know. And we're talking, of course, about one of the most interesting animals of all, electric eels, which have evolved to be able to use electricity, even as a non-artificial creature. And so we can kind of see where this Teslanesia thing is going. Creatures didn't evolve to produce electricity, and there's no distortion that favors electric creatures, but something in the land and waters of Teslanesia caused the environment to be electrified, and the only way life could survive there was to adapt. Hence why Teslanesia is inhabited. Not by humans, of course. I don't think any human can survive, at least not in, normal situations. I guess I don't really know what you would use to go into Teslanesia, but I guess there's something you can wear that makes you impervious to these electric spikes. I guess very anti-electric, I don't remember the word, basically the word that makes it so that kind of like hydrophobic, but it's about electricity. Electrophobic? That doesn't sound right. Anyways, yeah, if you use something made of hard plastic and it's very big, I guess you could survive there, but it's obviously not a place you would want to live in, unless if there's something very interesting about these islands, some sort of resource. Well, what am I talking about? We'll get there right a little soon, very soon. But one creature that has managed to adapt, just like the electric eels, is the Thunderbirds. Referred to in mythology by many names, we already mentioned the Thunderbirds in another one of these episodes, but they were referred as rocks. Rocks called, of course, with the R-O-K, not rocks as literally stones. But yeah, we've talked about it, and I don't really remember what episode it was. I know it had to do with Umurangi, the Red Rain. I don't know if it was this one or somewhere here-ish, but yeah, it was something around here. Anyways, the Thunderbirds we're talking about here are not Thunderbirds in the sense of just huge eagles, basically, as they were in the rock case. No, these are literal Thunderbirds. These are birds that have adapted to live with electricity growing through them. They bring storm with them, and with them bring electricity, which, is just everywhere in the islands. So they survive electricity better than other species. Now let's get back to the other thing we were talking about. It's in this continent that the most naturally generated electricity of Akupara exists. This is thanks to the higher proportions of azoth, which is present in these isles. So what is azoth? That is the very important resource we were talking about before. Azoth. Azoth is, in the study of alchemy, a term that refers to a solvent or universal substance that is associated with the idea that all matter holds a principle of life, or, in other words, a spirit. It was with the extraction of azoth that these alchemists in the Middle Ages and the early Renaissance wanted to create the Philosopher's Stone, something that through science was allowed to make humans live forever, or at least increase their amount of life by a very large margin. And so that is the story of Teslanesia. So why would anyone go there? Well, because it is very much possible that this is the continent that allows you to extract azoth from, and the electricity that exists in this continent as some sort of natural phenomenon is because of azoth and their large amounts in these isles. So if an expedition of humans was enough motivated to go there and had the resources to go there, they could extract this substance from this land and bring it home, and maybe through it we could discover completely new ways to use alchemy on. So that's kind of the gist of it when it comes to Teslanesia. There's also this thing right here, which is the Cup of Poseidon and the Emerald Arches, but I kind of want to leave it for the next episode, so I'm not gonna go into it this time. And of course, Mu, we'll see it later. Now, about Heterotopia, I'm not really sure if I made it in the last episode or not, so once again I will leave it for the next one. But I hope you enjoyed this description and discovering of the Garden Isles, Horus, and Teslanesia. And of course Bigle, who can forget about Bigle, right? Whatever. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys. I love that you keep supporting the series, no matter how much time it takes me to make one episode from the other one, and I hope you can continue supporting it throughout the years to come, or at least 1 year. I don't really intend to keep it going for another 2 years, that would be kind of insane. There's not enough land to do it. But maybe, who knows, we'll discover more maps like it. I'm actually making another video at the same time about something else that I looked at. And yeah, thank you for watching, and we will see each other next time. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and like the video, with the like button. See you!